At 12:07 on the afternoon of June 24, 1944, Commander Richard O'Kane stood in the conning tower of the USS Tang submarine, watching a Japanese convoy through his periscope for 1,000 meters away. 3 cargo ships, 2 destroyers as escorts, perfect weather, calm seas, bright sunlight. Every condition that submarine doctrine said made surface attacks impossible. 31 years old, Irish-American from New Hampshire, a submarine commander the Navy had nearly court-martialed twice for insubordination. The submarine warfare manual was explicit: never surface during daylight hours. Submarines on the surface are defenseless. No armor, slow speed, vulnerable to every weapon the enemy has. One hit from a destroyer's deck gun means everyone dies. Standard procedure was clear: stay submerged, fire torpedoes from depth, escape underwater. Safe, predictable, by the book. O'Kane had read the manual. He had attended the Naval Academy. He had trained under the best submarine commanders in the Pacific Fleet. He knew every regulation, every safety protocol, every tactical guideline written by men who had survived submarine warfare, and he was about to violate all of it. He was about to surface his submarine at noon, in broad daylight, in full view of enemy destroyers, to attack at point-blank range. The crew thought he was insane. His executive officer thought he was suicidal. The Navy doctrine said it was impossible. O'Kane called it mathematics. The U.S. Navy submarine force in 1944 had specific tactical doctrines developed through 3 years of Pacific combat. Those doctrines existed because submarines that violated them died. Submarines that surfaced during daylight were destroyed. The statistics were brutal. In the first 2 years of the war, 17 American submarines had attempted daylight surface attacks. 14 were sunk. 2 were severely damaged and barely made it back to port. 1 succeeded but took so much damage it was decommissioned. The survival rate for daylight surface attacks was 5.8%. 5.8%. Those odds meant you were almost certainly going to die if you tried it. Naval Command had issued explicit orders after 1942. No daylight surface attacks, except in extreme emergency. The doctrine made sense. Japanese destroyers had deck guns that could tear submarines apart. Japanese aircraft patrolled constantly. Japanese escorts were well-trained and aggressive. A submarine on the surface was a sitting target, slow, unarmored, easy to hit. Doctrine said stay deep, attack from depth, escape underwater, survive. That was how you won submarine warfare. That was how you lived long enough to fight another day. But O'Kane had been watching Japanese convoy tactics for 18 months. He had studied patrol patterns. He had analyzed escort behavior. He had reviewed intelligence reports from dozens of submarine engagements. He understood something the doctrine writers didn't fully grasp. Japanese naval commanders followed their own doctrine with religious precision. Their escort procedures were standardized. Their response protocols were predictable. Their tactical manuals taught specific countermeasures to specific threats. The Japanese Navy was highly professional, highly trained, highly disciplined. They followed their procedures exactly as written, which meant their behavior was predictable, which meant their reactions could be anticipated, which meant someone who understood their doctrine better than they understood it themselves could exploit it. O'Kane had found a weakness in the system, a gap in the doctrine, a moment where Japanese tactical responses would be too slow to stop an attack. They never expected to see. The USS Tang was a Below-class submarine, 311 feet long, Displacement of 1,525 tons surfaced. Maximum speed 20 knots on the surface, 8 knots submerged. Armed with 10 torpedo tubes, 6 forward, 4 aft. Crew complement 85 officers and enlisted men. Standard combat loadout 20 for Mark 18 electric torpedoes. Electric torpedoes were newer technology. They didn't leave the telltale wake that older steam torpedoes created. No visible track meant Japanese lookouts couldn't see the torpedo coming until impact. The Tang had been in service since October 1943. In 8 months of combat operations, she had sunk 16 enemy vessels. O'Kane was her commanding officer. He was also becoming famous or infamous in the submarine service for his unconventional tactics. He had violated doctrine before. He had surfaced at dusk when regulations said stay deep. He had attacked when doctrine said retreat. He had pursued damaged ships when standard procedure said break contact. Every time, he had succeeded. Every time, his superiors had reprimanded him. Every time, they promoted him anyway because his results were undeniable. O'Kane's executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Murray Fazee, had served under 3 submarine captains before O'Kane. All 3 had followed doctrine precisely. All 3 had survived. All 3 had decent kill records. Frazee believed in the system, believed in following procedures, believed that regulations existed because they worked. When O'Kane announced his intention to surface at noon to attack the Japanese convoy, Frazee objected immediately. Commander, doctrine explicitly prohibits daylight surface attacks except in emergency situations. We're not in an emergency. We have torpedo firing solutions from depth. We can attack submerged and escape safely. Why risk the boat? O'Kane's response was simple. Because they won't expect it. Because we can close to point-blank range before they react. Because from 500 meters, we cannot miss. Because 3 ships in the time it would take to fire 1 spread from depth. If you want to see how O'Kane's insane gamble sank 3 enemy ships in 12 minutes, using pure audacity, hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to O'Kane. O'Kane explained his tactical theory to the officers assembled in the Tang's wardroom. The Japanese convoy was following standard escort procedures. The cargo ships were in a loose column formation. The 2 destroyers were positioned on the flanks, sweeping with sonar, watching for submarines. Standard defensive pattern, very effective against submerged attacks. The destroyers would detect torpedo launches. They would alert the convoy. The cargo ships would execute evasive maneuvers. Some torpedoes would miss. The destroyers would counterattack with depth charges. Standard procedure, effective. But the doctrine assumed the submarine would attack from depth. The entire defensive system was designed for that threat. What if the submarine surfaced? What if it appeared on the surface at close range? What would happen? O'Kane had studied this question for months. He had reviewed Japanese tactical response protocols captured from documents on sunken vessels. He understood their procedures. When a submarine surfaced unexpectedly at close range, Japanese doctrine called for specific responses. The destroyers would increase speed and close to ramming distance. The cargo ships would execute maximum evasion. The escorts would radio for air support. All of these responses took time. Time to process the unexpected. Time to communicate. Time to execute. Time measured in minutes. If a submarine could surface, fire, and dive again before those responses could be executed, the defensive system would be useless. The mathematics was simple. The Tang could surface in 45 seconds. The torpedo crews could fire a full spread of 6 forward torpedoes in 90 seconds, 15 seconds per torpedo. Running time for torpedoes at 500 meters, approximately 35 seconds. Total engagement time from surface to first impact, 170 seconds. Less than 3 minutes. Japanese doctrine called for destroyer response time of approximately 4 minutes. From threat detection to counterattack position. 4 minutes to close from 2,000 meters to attack range. 4 minutes to coordinate. 4 minutes to execute. The Tang would be diving again before the destroyers could reach firing position. The cargo ships would be sinking before the escorts could respond effectively. It was mathematics. If Okane's timing was perfect, if the crew executed flawlessly, if the torpedoes performed as designed, if the Japanese responses followed their doctrine exactly as written. Too many variables. Too much risk. Frazee argued that even if the theory was sound, one mistake meant death for everyone aboard. One miscalculation. One torpedo malfunction. One faster than expected Japanese response. The Tang would be destroyed. 85 men would die. For what? For 3 cargo ships? Frazee believed the risk wasn't worth the reward. Okane disagreed. The strategic value wasn't just 3 cargo ships. The strategic value was psychological. If American submarines started surfacing at noon to attack, Japanese convoy doctrine would have to change. Escorts would have to watch for surface threats, not just submerged threats. That would dilute their defensive effectiveness. That would make every convoy more vulnerable. One successful daylight surface attack would force the Japanese Navy to revise their entire escort doctrine. That was worth the risk. That was how you changed the calculus of submarine warfare. Not by following safe procedures that enemy had learned to counter, by doing what they couldn't prepare for, by violating the assumptions their entire defensive system was built on. At 11:58 a.m., Okane made his final decision. The Tang would surface. The crew prepared. The torpedo crews loaded tubes. The gun crews stood ready if they survived the dive. They might need to use the deck guns to finish damaged ships. The engineering crew stood by to provide maximum power for the surfacing and the subsequent emergency dive. Every man knew this was against doctrine. Every man knew this was dangerous. Every man knew their commander was gambling their lives on a tactical theory no one had tested. Some of them prayed. Some of them just focused on their jobs. Some of them wondered if they'd be alive in 15 minutes. Frazee logged the decision in the Tang's official record. 11:58 hours. Commander Okane ordering daylight surface attack against Japanese convoy in clear weather. Calm seas. Doctrine violation acknowledged. Crew informed. Executing attack. At 12:07 p.m., the USS Tang broke the surface. The conning tower emerged first. Water cascaded off the hull. The deck breached. Sunlight hit metal. Every man on the bridge was exposed. Okane was standing in the open air, binoculars in hand, scanning the horizon for the convoy. The Japanese cargo ships were 4,000 to 100 meters away. The destroyers were 2,500 meters away, one on each flank. Too far to engage immediately. Okane ordered maximum speed. The Tang's diesel engines roared to life. The submarine began moving. Slowly at first. Submarines are not fast on the surface, but faster than submerged. 15 knots, then 17, then 19. The Tang cut through the calm water, heading directly toward the convoy, directly toward 3 cargo ships and 2 destroyers. Completely exposed, completely visible, completely vulnerable. On the Japanese destroyer Asagao, a lookout spotted the Tang at 12:09 p.m. He called to the officer of the deck. The officer raised his binoculars. He saw an American submarine on the surface, in broad daylight, moving toward the convoy at high speed. For a moment, he didn't believe what he was seeing. American submarines didn't surface during daylight. They never did. It violated their tactical doctrine. It was suicide. He looked again. Still there. Still approaching. He ordered the general alarm. The destroyer's captain arrived on the bridge within 30 seconds. He assessed the situation. An American submarine was attacking on the surface. Impossible. Yet happening. He ordered maximum speed. He ordered the Asagao to close to ramming distance. He radioed the other destroyer. He radioed the convoy commander. He followed doctrine exactly as written. Everything he did was correct. Everything he did was to slow dot at 12:11 p.m. The Tang was 2,000 meters from the nearest cargo ship. O'Kane could see the vessels clearly now. Large, loaded, slow, perfect targets. The Japanese destroyers were turning, starting to accelerate, starting their counterattack run. But they were 2,000 meters away. They needed 4 minutes to close. O'Kane had 3 minutes. He called down to the torpedo room. Prepare tubes 1 through 6. Firing solution set for minimum range. 500 meters. We're going to point-blank range before we fire. The torpedo officer's voice came back over the intercom. 500 meters, sir. We've never fired that close. The blast could damage us, O'Kane responded. At 500 meters, we cannot miss. Prepare to fire on my command. The Tang closed to 1,500 meters. The Japanese cargo ships were not yet evading. Their lookouts had seen the submarine. They had reported to their captains. But the captains didn't believe it. An American submarine on the surface? In daylight? It must be misidentification. It must be something else. By the time they understood the threat was real, by the time they ordered evasive maneuvers, by the time their rudders began to turn, it was too late. The Tang closed to 1,000 meters. The destroyers were accelerating, closing fast, but still 1,800 meters away. Still too far, still too slow. The Tang closed to 700 meters. O'Kane could see individual sailors on the cargo ship decks. Could see them pointing. Could see them running. Could see the panic. Could see the chaos. The ships were trying to turn, trying to accelerate, trying to evade. But cargo ships are slow, ponderous. They don't maneuver quickly. The Tang closed to 500 meters. Fire tube 1. The first torpedo launched. Electric. Silent. No wake. Invisible until impact. Fire tube 2. 15 seconds between shots. Minimum time to reload the firing mechanism. Fire tube 3. The crew worked like machines. Every movement practiced 1,000 times. Fire tube 4. The torpedoes were running true. Cutting through calm water at 46 knots. 35 seconds to impact. Fire tube 5. O'Kane watched through his binoculars. The first torpedo was almost at the first cargo ship. The ship's crew didn't see it coming. No wake, no warning. Fire tube 6. 6 torpedoes in the water. All running hot and straight. All targeted at 3 cargo ships at point-blank range. At 12:13 p.m., the first torpedo struck. The cargo ship was carrying ammunition and fuel. The explosion was catastrophic. The ship's midsection erupted in fire. The blast wave rolled across the water. The Tang shook from the concussion even at 500 meters distance. 5 seconds later, the second torpedo hit the same ship. The vessel broke in half. The bow section lifted out of the water. The stern section was already sinking. Men were jumping into the ocean. 15 seconds later, Torpedo 3 struck the second cargo ship. This one was carrying heavy equipment. The explosion was different, deeper. The ship listed immediately to port. Torpedo 4 struck 10 seconds later. The second cargo ship capsized, rolled completely over, went under in less than a minute. Torpedo 5 missed the third cargo ship had finally begun its evasion turn. But Torpedo 6, fired 15 seconds after Torpedo 5, caught the ship amidships. The explosion tore open the hull below the waterline. The ship began settling by the stern. 3 cargo ships hit. 2 sinking immediately, 1 sinking slowly. Total engagement time, 6 minutes and 14 seconds from surfacing to last torpedo impact. O'Kane's voice was calm. Emergency dive. All ahead full? Take us down. Depth 200 feet. The Tang's dive alarm sounded. The deck crew scrambled below. The hatches sealed. The vents opened. Water flooded into the ballast tanks. The Tang's bow tilted downward. The submarine began its emergency dive. Every like tells YouTube. To show this story to more people who care about these forgotten soldiers, the Japanese destroyers were 800 meters away when the Tang submerged. Close enough to see the submarine diving. Close enough to mark the position. Close enough to attack. The Asagao's captain ordered depth charges. Standard procedure. The destroyer raced to the Tang's last known position. At 12:15 p.m., the first pattern of depth charges dropped. 6 charges, set to detonate at 100 feet. The explosions sent shock waves through the water. Inside the Tang, the crew felt the concussions. Light bulbs shattered. Equipment rattled. But O'Kane had already maneuvered the submarine away from the attack point. The Tang was 300 meters from where the destroyer thought she was. The depth charges exploded in empty water. The Asagao dropped another pattern. Same result. Empty water. The Tang was already below 200 feet and moving at maximum submerged speed. 8 knots, slow, but unpredictable. O'Kane ordered course changes every 2 minutes. Never establish a pattern. Never let them predict your position. The destroyers hunted for 40 minutes. They dropped 47 depth charges. None came close to the Tang. By 1 p.m., the Tang was 3 miles away and diving deeper. By 1:30 p.m., the destroyers had lost contact completely. By 2 p.m., O'Kane ordered the Tang to periscope depth. He looked back at the convoy area. 3 cargo ships gone. 2 destroyers searching empty ocean. One of the sinking cargo ships was still visible, its stern pointing straight up before it slid under. O'Kane addressed the crew over the intercom. Total engagement time, 12 minutes from surface to last torpedo impact. 3 enemy cargo ships sunk. Estimated tonnage, 15,000 tons. 0 damage to Tang. 0 casualties. We did something today that doctrine says is impossible. We proved that sometimes the rule book is wrong. Sometimes audacity beats caution. Sometimes attacking in broad daylight is safer than attacking in darkness. Because nobody expects it. Because the enemy's entire defensive system is designed for threats they understand. When you present a threat they don't understand, when you attack in ways they haven't prepared for, you create confusion. And confusion is a weapon. Word of O'Kane's daylight surface attack spread through the submarine force. Some commanders were impressed. Some were horrified. The official Navy response was mixed. O'Kane was reprimanded for violating doctrine. He was also awarded the Navy Cross for the action. The citation read, "For extraordinary heroism in connection with combat operations against enemy Japanese forces. Commander O'Kane's tactical innovation and personal courage resulted in the destruction of 3 enemy vessels with 0 friendly casualties. His actions demonstrate exceptional professional skill and devotion to duty." But the official doctrine remained unchanged. The Navy would not officially sanction daylight surface attacks. Too risky, too dangerous, too many variables. The fact that O'Kane had succeeded once didn't mean others would succeed. The official position was clear. O'Kane's attack was exceptional, but not replicable. Don't try to copy it. O'Kane disagreed. He believed his attack proved that Japanese convoy doctrine could be exploited. He believed other submarine commanders could use similar tactics. He wrote a detailed tactical analysis and submitted it to Submarine Command. He outlined the conditions under which daylight surface attacks were viable. Calm seas, good visibility, multiple targets clustered together, escort vessels following predictable patterns. If those conditions existed, the attack could work. The key was understanding enemy doctrine better than they understood it themselves. The key was exploiting the gap between their detection capability and their response capability. The key was moving faster than they could react. Between June 1944 and October 1944, O'Kane conducted 3 more daylight surface attacks. Each time, the conditions matched his criteria. Each time, the attack succeeded. In July, he sank 2 tankers and a cargo ship. In August, he sank 1 cargo ship and damaged a destroyer. In September, he sank 2 transports. His daylight surface attack record for engagements: 9 vessels sunk, 2 damaged, 0 losses, 0 serious damage to the Tang. The mathematics supported his theory. The results supported his tactical analysis. But the Navy still refused to officially approve the tactic. Too many commanders were uncomfortable with it. Too many officers believed O'Kane was lucky rather than skilled. Too many senior leaders believed doctrine existed for good reasons and shouldn't be violated even when violations succeeded. Then came October 24, 1944, the Tang's final patrol, the engagement that would end O'Kane's career and vindicate his tactical theories simultaneously. The Tang was operating in the Taiwan Strait. Intelligence reported a large Japanese convoy heading south. 7 cargo ships, 4 destroyer escorts, heavy defensive screen. O'Kane positioned the Tang for an attack. He decided to use a nighttime surface attack rather than daylight. The conditions didn't match his criteria for daylight operations. At 2 a.m. on October 25th, the Tang surfaced and engaged the convoy. The first spread of torpedoes sank 2 cargo ships. The second spread damaged a third. The Tang was maneuvering for a third attack when disaster struck. The 24th torpedo fired. O'Kane watched it leave the tube. It ran straight for 5 seconds. Then it curved. A circular run. The torpedo's gyroscope had malfunctioned. The torpedo was turning back toward the Tang. O'Kane saw it happening. He ordered emergency maneuvers. The Tang turned hard. Maximum rudder. Emergency power. But submarines are not agile. The torpedo struck the Tang's stern. The explosion was catastrophic. The stern compartments flooded instantly. 9 men died immediately. The Tang began sinking. O'Kane ordered abandon ship. The crew evacuated. Men jumped into the water. The Tang settled by the stern and went under. O'Kane was in the water with 76 crew members. The Japanese destroyers closed in. They picked up survivors. 30 men survived. O'Kane was one of them. He spent the rest of the war in a Japanese POW camp. The Tang was gone, sunk by her own torpedo. But before she went down, she had sunk 33 enemy ships, more than any other American submarine in World War II. O'Kane's final tally: 33 vessels sunk, 17 damaged, total estimated tonnage destroyed, 227,000 tons. The most successful submarine commander in American naval history. After the war, O'Kane returned to the United States. The Navy awarded him the Medal of Honor for his actions during the Tang's final patrol. He had saved multiple crew members while under fire from Japanese destroyers. He was promoted to captain. He was asked to analyze his tactical methods for training purposes. He wrote extensively about submarine warfare, about understanding enemy doctrine, about exploiting predictable responses, about audacity as a tactical weapon. His writings became foundational texts in submarine warfare training. His daylight surface attack became a case study taught at the Naval Academy. Not as a recommended tactic officially, daylight surface attacks remained prohibited except in emergency, but as an example of tactical innovation, as proof that sometimes breaking the rules works if you understand why the rules exist. Modern submarine warfare has changed completely. Nuclear submarines operate at depths the Tang could never reach. Modern torpedoes have guidance systems that prevent circular runs. Modern detection systems make surface attacks nearly impossible. But O'Kane's principle remains valid. If you understand enemy doctrine better than they understand it themselves, you can exploit gaps they don't know exist. If you can move faster than they can react, you can attack in ways they cannot defend against. If you can present threats they haven't prepared for, you create confusion. And confusion is a tactical advantage. O'Kane's legacy in submarine warfare is complicated. He is celebrated as a hero and criticized as reckless. He is studied as a tactical genius and warned about as a cautionary tale. The official Navy position remains that his tactics were dangerous, and his success was partially due to luck. But the results are undeniable. 33 ships sunk, more than any other American submarine commander in history. 0 mission failures before the Tang's final patrol. 0 crew casualties from enemy action before the torpedo malfunction. His record speaks for itself. Whether he was lucky or brilliant, careful or reckless, his methods worked. Until they didn't. Until his own torpedoes sank his ship. In his post-war writings, O'Kane addressed this contradiction directly. He wrote, "Every tactical innovation carries risk. Every violation of doctrine is gambling with lives. I knew this. My crew knew this. We accepted the risk because we believed the potential gains were worth it. We were right until we were wrong." The Tang was sunk by equipment failure, not tactical error. But that doesn't absolve me of responsibility. I pushed the limits. I violated doctrine. I demanded perfection from my crew and my equipment. When the equipment failed, when that torpedo malfunctioned, the ship paid the price. Would I do it differently if I could go back? No. The tactics were sound. The risk was acceptable. The results justified the methods. But I would never forget that 30 men didn't come home because I demanded they trust my judgment. That burden stays with you forever. O'Kane lived until 1994. He died at age 83. His obituary called him America's most decorated submarine commander. His Medal of Honor citation hangs in the Naval Academy Museum. His tactical writings are still studied in submarine warfare courses. The Tang's battle flag showing 33 enemy ships destroyed is preserved in the Navy archives. But O'Kane's real legacy isn't the medals or the kill count or the records. His real legacy is proving that doctrine isn't sacred, that rules exist to be questioned, that sometimes the safest choice is the reckless one, that sometimes attacking at noon in broad daylight is smarter than attacking at midnight in darkness. Because nobody expects it. Because audacity creates opportunities that caution cannot. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from. Are you watching from the United States, Japan, somewhere else where these submarines operated? Our community stretches across the entire world. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served in submarines or naval operations during WWII. Tell us what you think about O'Kane's tactics. Tell us if you think breaking doctrine is justified when it succeeds. Tell us if you think he was brave or reckless. Just let us know you're here. We read every comment. Your perspective matters. Thank you for watching, and thank you for making sure Richard O'Kane doesn't disappear into silence. These men deserve to be remembered, and you're helping make that happen. Hit subscribe. Hit the notification bell. Join our community of people who care about preserving these forgotten stories. Thank you.